What's going on, advocates? Welcome back to another edition of the Black Mental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Reg. Joined today with me is a special person because you were a part of a moment that with the news, we at the time of this recording, it's a news article that just went out and a lot of people are gravitating toward it. We also are a part of a program and an organization together and working on some stuff, but we'll get into that because I try to get, when I get people from Black Men Hill or that I meet through Black Men Hill, I try to not talk about Black Men Hill because I'm like, I'm working closely with these people, but I'm only working with them in this capacity. So I try to make that the smallest portion of the conversation because we got forever to talk about that in the next capacity. But I don't introduce anybody. Please let the people know who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Hey everybody, Reg, thank you so much for having me on. Everyone, my name is Edie King. I am a therapist, an author, educator, native of Philadelphia. I am the owner of a private practice called Help Heal Serve LLC, and I am really just excited to be here.
Yes. So one of the main questions I had too, because I thought it was an awesome name. I my one of the taglines I had on my with my type of organization, I haven't been really fooling it up, but it was hoping, hold on, it's healing, hearing, and helping. I think that
Mhm.
is it. Whatever, it's something along those lines.
Yeah,
But
sure.
but I want to change hearing to hoping because I feel like hope is one that we all need. But again, I haven't been paying attention to it, so I'll leave that alone. But what do the words or the phrase or the term help, heal, serve mean to you?
So it was something that came to me. Shoot, even before I became a therapist, probably when I was like in my master's program. Um, and because I'm thinking back, it was me. I was probably honestly still in undergrad. So journaling, writing my thoughts, that's always been big for me. I'm also very much a spiritual person and ingrained in my faith, So when things get downloaded into my spirit, I'm like, oh wow, thank you, God. So I really feel like that was given to me some time ago, over 10 years ago. And I was journaling, and I mean, when I was in school, I knew that I wanted to be a therapist, and I knew that I loved helping people. I knew that I wanted to do that. And it just came to me, and I wrote, I'm like, help those serve. I'm like, oh, that's dope. And I kind of forgot that I had written that. And years later, like when I formed my business, and then I think when we moved, I was like going through old journals. I'm like, yo, like this has literally been a part of me. Like this idea, this mission, this vision, it's been a part of me for so long. So it's the words, the phrasing has been there for a really long time, but more or less what it's matured into is really just like my desire, like my life's purpose. And obviously that's the name of my company, but that's just what I do. That's what I desire to do. So obviously in a professional aspect, but then also in regards to like my personal life, like the people that come into my life, they often say, and this isn't like a toot of my own horn, but they often say that they leave changed, like, and I firmly believe like not leaving anyone the same way that they came to you, and that's supposed to be interdependent and mutual in a lot of ways, and it is. But really just like help, heal, serve, that's what I feel like my extension is supposed to be here on earth. That's what I feel like a big part of my purpose is. And it varies like what that looks like. So for some people, it might be actually sitting down having a counseling session. For others, it might be giving them a piece of advice. For some people, it might be having a word of prayer. For some people, it might be physically giving them something. But serving is really big for me. And I think all a part of that, people will, the healing process will happen. So I hope I answered that, and I don't think anybody ever really asked me that in that way. But overall, it just feels like a huge part of like who I am as a person, and like what I love to do, and what I feel like what I just do naturally, and what I do well.
Mm. See, and I got a few questions that just popped up in there. You answered the question, and that's the goal too. I love when people that come on the podcast say like I've never been asked that or whatever, because again, you're therapists, so the questions that I feel like it's disrespectful almost to ask you all questions that you kind of get constantly. Oh,
Mm.
how do you manage depression, or how do you manage anxiety, or 10 tips or 10? I don't want to ask none of that because y'all put out billions, millions, y'all put out content all the time that is to
Right.
give, to serve that purpose. So I'm glad I was able to ask that question. And then for undergrad, you said I learned that you went to East Stroudsburg. I went to Shippensburg for undergrad, my first stint.
Oh, pass you
Um,
some.
so I went to that PSEC, but Then you said something that I wanted to dive into a little deeper. This off the script, of course. I told
Sure.
you whatever you say, that's where the
But
conversation gonna go. One of the things I know with people who naturally feel obligated to serve, and when I say naturally feel like it's in them that they want to do it,
Mhm,
is that sometimes their cup doesn't get replenished as much as they serve.
mhm,
And so and I'm big on that piece that you mentioned about leaving people better than you found them.
mhm.
And that may not even be like they were in the darkest of places, but
Sure,
they
sure.
left with a piece of you
But
that
not
made them
taking
feel better.
anything from them.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mhm.
And so my question within that is how do you manage when it's not mutual for you? Like where you are not taking something back from an individual, like where you don't get the same thing that you're giving.
Sure. I think that's a great question. And hopefully the answer can help somebody, right? And how they show up in their lives and in their relationships. One, I really try to operate from the belief that everybody is literally doing the best that they can with what they have. That's number one. That everybody's doing the best that they can with what they have. Number two is that all relationships won't be equal, like 50-50 equal. So when where I've matured to, because I can't say I was always this way, right? Because I think when as humans, we are selfish, self-centered, where we're ego-centered, right? So like what it takes is growth and self-reflection and understanding and self-awareness to be able to get out of yourself and to understand that like, oh, the world isn't just here to like serve me, right? And you realize that like this relationship isn't just about what I can get from it. So more or less I've tried to practice operating from a place of just like altruism and just like doing it because I can or because I want to and not because I have to or not because I'm trying to get something from this person or get something in return. And like I said, it's a practice, so it's not perfect every now and then. I'm just like, oh, she didn't even say thank you, little things like that. But it's just a practice. And how I manage it is, like I said, understanding that everybody is doing the best that they can with what they have, meeting people where they are, appreciating people for who they are and what they can do, not taking it personally, and really just managing my expectations, right? Like understanding, what might be going on with someone or understanding what their capacity or what their resources or what their skills are. And one thing, the majority of my friends are therapists. So one thing that we all practice with one another is just like we call each other up, girl, you got the capacity to listen to me because sometimes we just don't. So if somebody calls me and I've had a long day after sessions or I just don't have it, and they want to vent or they want something from me, I get into the practice of asking them like, what part of me do you need right now? Do you want feedback? Do you just want me to listen? Do you want advice? Do you need me to come and help? I need to know. And I kind of like ask people first, like how much can you give? And you get into the practice of that, so you know who your people are and you know who you can rely on for certain things. So for this person, I know I can go to for prayer. For this person, I know I can go to, they are going to show up for me physically. For this person, I know that they might be able to help me, do this thing on my website. So being able to understand what people's skills and what people's resources are and what people are willing to do, not taking it personally if they can. And like when it comes to, again, so in answering your question, right, when it comes to just like when people can't meet my needs, understanding that like that's not one, it's not their responsibility or their obligation. And I can just appreciate them for what they were able to do. And anything else, I can rely on God, on my higher power to meet the rest of those needs, or I can expand my resources. So just not taking it personally, because like it ain't nobody's job or responsibility to do anything for me. So I just try to appreciate all of it. So hopefully that made sense.
No, it did, and I love that. I gotta rewind that when clip it up or go back because I love that. Like when you ask those questions, or like what part of me do you need in this moment? Because I usually
Sure.
ask like, what do you need from me in this moment?
Right.
But what part of me do you need with? And I think that's a little deeper diving into that experience. But I gotta give pushback,
Sure. I'm
and
listening.
because you're right. And that's kind of how I live, but you're right in the sense of for certain people that qualifies for. But what about the people that were a parent that
Mhm,
they were supposed their job was supposed to do that, a
mhm,
spouse where they signed up to commit to that
mhm.
portion of your life. Um I'm just thinking about different
Closer
scenario.
relationship.
Yeah,
Closer
those
relationship.
those closer
See,
relationships.
I got an answer for you there.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So you said parents first. So closer relationships. I'm a grown woman. I am 32 years old. Anything that my parents did or did not do for me in my upbringing, I have to decide how I want to feel about that today, right? So like no parent, no one, no human is perfect, and my parents weren't perfect, right? They had their issues, they have their issues, and thankfully I've been able to now have certain conversations with my parents where I felt like where I felt like I needed more from them and they weren't able to show up, and we can talk about what the disadvantages were or what the disparities were that caused them to not be able to do that. One thing I was always fortunate to have is knowing that my parents love me. Like they didn't do anything else. I knew that, right? So in my growth and in my self-reflection, my healing, my therapeutic, my process, right, I'm able to understand and have a certain level of compassion and forgiveness of knowing that like my parents were also doing the best that they could with what they had. I'm entitled to my feelings, so I can still feel sad, I can still feel hurt, I can still feel neglected, but I can feel all those different things, and I can also choose to have some perspective and not holding that against them, right? So now that we've had this conversation, what can we do? Like how can you meet my needs and how can we more or less meet one another's needs? So even with that, I still think it's a conversation. And for me, it doesn't benefit me to hold on to that or to like hate my parents because like because they didn't show up for me. Now, this is different. This is my story, right? So like because of my parents' accountability, because of their willingness to try to see me differently and do better, right? In us conversing about these different things. So I'm not saying this to anyone whose parent is still actively harming them, right? Because that's a different story, that's a different case. And in those cases, I think you have to see people for who they are and where they are, and again, manage your expectations. So if my parents were still harming me, I wouldn't try to continue to engage with them in that same way because I'm just like, hey, my parents have some deficits and I can't, I, it's not, it's harmful for me to constantly put myself in that situation. And now I'm the only one to blame because I'm a grown up. I can choose whether or not I engage with them or not. So that's that one when it comes to parents. But for me in my life, there are still certain things like as a result of some of the experiences in my upbringing, I became overly independent and very self-sufficient, right? And it looked to a lot of people, it looked like a really great skill, but in a lot of ways it was a defense mechanism, right? Because it's just like, oh, ain't nobody gonna do it, or this person can't do it, they might want to but they can't, so I'm going to do it on my own, right? So that's been something that I wore as a badge of honor for a really long time, but recently within maybe like the past 5 to 7 years, I'm realizing like, maybe that's not as much of a badge of honor. Maybe I need to allow people to be there for me. So one of the biggest challenges is my parents and my siblings, showing up for me in ways that are really going to be beneficial to me because I've done so much on my own, so like trying to surprise me, trying to buy me gifts, that's hard for them, so I really just try to be mindful of being able to appreciate, being able to receive, being able to of giving myself permission to kind of like call on people and to reach out to people so that they can help me based off of their ability and their skill set. In regards to spousal relationships, right?
Hey y'all,
Again,
that's why I like talking to therapists because they remember everything and they can put everything in this box and context and think go have at it. Cause I had that in my mind. I'm like, all right, spouse, but you're already
I'm
there. Go
coming back
ahead.
to it. I'm gonna spend a block on you for sure. In regards to spousal relationships, right? So when you get into a relationship, and especially when you are in a marriage, right? So two people come together, they make an agreement, there is a commitment, there is a legal binding, right? So there are expectations. It's important to have those expectations, and it's especially important to communicate those expectations because I think oftentimes what goes wrong is that a lot of expectations are unstated or not clarified, right? So my partner's idea of what might be of what I might need is different than what I actually mean, right? So when it comes to that, I understand that my husband, that he is a human as well, and I'm a human as well. So although we made this commitment to each other, it is not his sole purpose to make me happy. It's not his sole purpose to meet my every single one of my needs. That's not reality. It's not possible, right? So he meets a lot of my needs, right? But I was a whole person, and it was my responsibility to it was my responsibility to um it was my responsibility to be happy and to do my work on my own before he came into my life, and to continue to do that, right? So one of the things that I remember when we first met, he was just like, oh, I want to make you happy. I'm like, that's not your job. Like, anything that you bring to my life, it's icing on the
The
cake. It's the cherry
bonus.
on top. It's the bonus. And I think a lot of people, they either don't realize that, or they place these unrealistic expectations on their partner, and that's not going, to me, that isn't that that's a surefire way of you being disappointed and this person not feeling good enough, right? So he's not in my head, I'm not in his head, but the best ways that we try to communicate what we need is just like, oh, hey, this is important for me, or are you willing to do this? So one thing for me, I'm really big on willingness and effort. So I might want the dishes washed in a very specific way, and my husband might do it in a different way, or he might put it in the dishwasher, and now I'm pissed off because he put it in the dishwasher instead of wash. Like, girl, the dishes is washed.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to appreciate people for who they are, for what they give, understanding that this person has their own life, their own day. So yes, we share our world, we share our lives, but my husband has a job, he has friends, he had a life before me, and I had one before him. So we share a lot, but at the end of the day, when I'm sitting down at dinner and I have nothing else to give, he understands that, because he knows that I probably talked to a bunch of clients today, and he's just like, all right, babe, I get it. So really being able to understand who you are in relationship with, being able to understand what their strengths and what their, I wouldn't say weaknesses, so what they're good at and what they're not good at, being able to manage your expectations. And appreciation is the name of the game. Like, babe, thank you for taking the trash out. Babe, thank you for cooking. And yes, these might be regular things, but they matter, right? Like, because when I was single, when I was living by myself, if I don't feel like cooking dinner, I'm eating me a banana, drinking some water, and going to bed, right? Like, I don't have to do any of this. So appreciation is important. Validating effort and willingness. So it might not be done exactly how I wanted to, but the fact that you were willing to do that, the fact that you were willing to go to this event with me, with these in this industry that you don't work in, the fact that you were willing to do that, those are important. And that is a very active practice in my relationship. Appreciation, respect, validation, hearing each other, and trying our best to see. And if I can't meet it, then like, oh, okay, well, call, like, he'll be the first to be like, he'll call my best friend, like, yo, she, can you call her, if he knows, and he'll listen, right? But he's not a therapist. Like, he's
Mm.
not, that's not his, he's not going to probably break it down or validate or understand me in the same way that my one really good friend who's a therapist can. Like, so he knows how to support me even when he's not doing exactly what I want him to do. And it's
Mm.
not about all of what I want him to do. He's his own person and I'm my own person, right? So even though we are committed to sharing a world and to loving one another and respecting one another, there is still, I think sometimes we put too much on our partner for our happiness. That was a really long, drawn out answer. I don't know which one have to edit out of that, but
I'm keeping all of it because it
about
nah, and
about healthy relationships, man. It's important.
nah, I'm keeping every last bit of it because it's all and the next question is going to go right into what you just asked or what you just offered as an answer, because it's all valid and it's all needed and it all is important in what
Sure.
makes a healthy, life for yourself and for the relationships around you. And
Mm-hmm.
so even going into that part, I realized, and that's one of the things with me and my lady, we talk a lot and more than we found that other couples talk. And I'm like,
Right.
wait, y'all, it's the same thing I would say with Edie right now. I would say with her next to me or to her, and she already
Absolutely.
knows it probably before y'all even I told it to y'all. And
Absolutely.
so, and when I find out that some couples don't even have those certain conversations, I'm like, man, like what is that gap? But the question to you is, some of these conversations, even going back into the parenting portion, is tough conversation because you risk the opportunity of offending the other person,
Yes.
even though you know that conversation is necessary because it is a roadblock within your relationship, whether that be parental, relational, friendships, or whatever. So,
Mhm.
how do you navigate having those tough type of conversations, or what advice do you give as a therapist, coach, or whatever to a individual that is having that issue?
I think that's a good question. I think it varies person to person. Um, I think it depends on the individual relationship dynamic, and knowing your audience in a way, knowing who you're speaking to, right? So, for example, I'll say my mom. She probably gonna listen to this, and I can say this to her. My mom is emotionally expressive. Some people might say sensitive, but I'm going to say emotionally
I
expressive,
love that.
and
Preaching.
very emotionally expressive. And she's an empath, and she feels very, very easily, right? So whether it's feelings of like joy or happiness and excitement, or feelings of like hurt and pain and sadness, right? Like she feels it deeply, and it's not hard for her to feel those things. um I am emotionally expressive, and I also have like a lot of reason, and I also use a lot of intellect as well. I intellectualize stuff, and that's another defense mechanism, but we ain't got to get into that. But so there might be some things that I say to my mom that may hurt her feelings, and I don't intend to hurt her feelings. So when it comes to having those conversations, it's all about understanding who you're talking to. So I might be able to say something to my sister that I can't say it in the same way as my mom, or I might be joking or be a little facetious, and that, it might hurt her feelings. So really, just understanding who you're talking to. Respect is Lauren Hill. Respect is the minimum, right? Respect is so important in relationships. Respecting and valuing this person just as a human, right? Like respect and value them, and I don't think love can come without respect. So of course, if I love you, I automatically respect you. So I'm talking about people that I do life with, my family, my close friends, the people who I'm connected to. So these people I love, and these people I also respect. So I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to say anything that's going to be hurtful, offensive, or harmful to you. Now, I am really big on the importance of owning your feelings, right? So, like, one of the things in my adult life that I've been able, and now that I'm a therapist, right? Because my mom be like, don't be therapizing me. So, one thing that I say to my mom, I'm like, well, mom, you felt hurt, but those are your feelings. Like, I didn't hurt you, because sometimes we can use really accusatory language, like you hurt me, or you did this, or you did that. It's just like, no, like you felt hurt, right? So like own that, right? So what was it that I said, or what was the tone, or how did I say it? So my family, my partner, they all know that, like, we gonna break this down, because it wasn't my intent. I'm not an argumentative person. I'm not a confrontational person. Conflict arises in relationship, period, because we're different. Humans are different, period, right? But the majority of the conflict, I manage it just by communicating, right? Clarifying, understanding, changing, and I'm consciously, self-reflect. Consistently self-reflecting, right? Like, okay, what did I say, or what was that tone, or like, could I have used a different verbiage or whatever, right? So I'm trying to be mindful of that, because obviously, if I know that this is a touchy such situation, or somewhere that we're on two different ends of the spectrum on, I want to make sure that we accomplish the goal. And that's understanding that it's not me and you against the situation. It's not me and you against one another. It's us against the situation, us against whatever obstacle it is. So that's one of the really big things that we practice in our relationship. And I try to practice in all my other relationships. Like, just understanding, like, all right, well, when you said this, what did you really mean by that? Like, really asking deeper conversations. And my husband will tell you, like, we really will get into it. And people, they are shocked when we tell them, like, when we're around different couples and stuff, and they be like, y'all don't argue. I'm like, no, not in the traditional sense. So we don't
Mm.
argue in the form of like yelling,
Yeah.
cussing, raising our voices. We've never done it. We've been together for 6 years. Never, ever, right? Never raised our voices. Now, we will have disagreements. We
Mm.
do, there are pieces of miscommunication. We get on each other's nerves. We need to go to different sides of the house. We need to, all right, hey, can we talk now? That happens. We manage and we navigate conflict and miscommunication. But arguing, no, like, I'm not going to talk to you that's not how I was raised. Like, my parents didn't talk to me like that. Like, this is not what we're going to do. So I think it's important to know your audience, know who you're talking to, communicating where you are, not speaking from your place of pain, you know, because sometimes if we feel offended, then we want to respond with another offense. But understanding like, you know, I feel X, Y, and Z, and I think, you know, what your tone had a little bit to do with it. Can you help me understand that a little bit more? So really, I'm just really committed to trying to understand, because I know that most conflict, most wars even come from a misunderstanding. You know, somebody didn't get what they wanted, somebody didn't get what they needed, actually, you know, or what they felt they were entitled to. And then entitlement, we gotta go talk about that all day long with ego, right? Like, I ain't entitled to nothing, right? But to stay black and die, right? So understanding that, like, this person doesn't necessarily owe me anything, right? So anything that they give me, it's a choice, it's a gift, right? So like, I'm going to try my best to see it and appreciate it and receive it, and kind of like try to really understand it. Again, these long answers,
No,
you
it's
guys.
a but I've learned so much. It's actually one of my favorite episodes, at least for this year. But it's one of my favorite episodes because when I learn, usually, you know, some of the things I've kind of known and heard, but the way
Sure.
you've put concepts and explained it, it has resonated and taught me something. So my favorite episodes for anybody out there that's listening is when I learn something. My
Yeah.
goal is
Yeah.
to learn and to pull out information as much as possible
Sure.
from the experts of these people's experiences. This is all
Sure.
from your experience and your
Yeah.
journey and things of nature. And so I'm learning a lot. So I love the long answers, and I actually about to start extending the podcast to longer than an hour, just so that way I can have more of these
That we
type
can
of
conversation.
conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
For sure.
one thing that I'm learning now, because I'm in school now, I dropped out of ship unfortunately the first time around, but I'm back in Drexel,
Okay.
and I'm in the well, I'm actually in health services administration, but I take a lot of the behavioral health courses just because I'm of being in this podcast, being with Black
Yeah.
Hill, doing those different things. I'm
Yeah.
like, I gotta have a mental health foundation. It's important for me,
Sure.
or behavioral health foundation. But one of the things I learned that I seen that you either took, I don't want to say took courses, but kind of specialize in by learning the bio is internal family systems.
Mhm.
And I'd never looked at family as a system until I learned about it. You get what I mean? And so, if you can, or if you feel willing to, can you explain family systems and why is it important for us to know about that in that way?
So, the family is a system. So, what I was referring to is a specific intervention, internal family systems, or IFS, and this is more so from the individual standpoint. It's not so much like family system theory. So that's a different approach or theory or intervention. So, internal family systems, it's essentially the this ideal or concept that as a human, as an individual, we each have a number of different parts of ourselves, a number of different identities or personalities or parts, whatever. So the language that we use from the theory is called parts. It's also called parts theory. So um I want to clarify, it's not multiple personality disorder. It's not, you know, like dissociative identity disorder. It's not that. It's just as a human. So essentially, we, under certain circumstances, there are different parts of us that might come to the surface, right? Or that might thrive under certain conditions. And it is a lot of times it's born out of, you know, our experiences, some experiences that might be adverse or or traumatizing, you know. So under those conditions, this part of me is born. So like I shared earlier, there's a part of me that is very independent and self-sufficient, right? I ain't got to worry about you, nobody doing it for me. I'm gonna make it happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was a part of me that was born, right? I grew up in poverty, grew up in the hood, living on public assistance the majority of my life. My parents weren't able to do certain things for me. My parents didn't know anything about navigating the college system. My parents didn't know anything about a lot of different things. So, oh, I'm going to go into overdrive mode because I know this is what I want for myself, right? So those qualities were helpful for me in that way. But when I get into a place where I actually have to be a team player, I have to submit or do these other things, it's just like those qualities aren't so helpful for me, you know. So now I got to pull out this other part of me. So that's essentially what it is. And I use it when it comes to, when I use it in therapy, when, you know, like obviously clients are, if a human is making a decision and they're like, yo, I just keep on doing this and I don't understand why I keep on doing this. I don't know. I know I don't want this, but I keep on doing it. It's just like, okay, well, let's understand more about that part. Like, what is it like? What is that behavior connected to? So really understanding that, and a lot of time it's connected to a part, right? So like, what are some of the characteristics? What are some of the traits? What are the conditions that cause it to come out? What's so good about having that part, right? So what's so good about Edie having this independent, self-sufficient part? Oh, I'm gonna make it happen no matter what, right? Like I don't have to rely on people. I don't have to trust people. I don't have to, ask for help. I don't have to do any of those things. I don't have to appear vulnerable, right? That's really what that is, and I don't have to be disappointed or let down, right? But what would happen if and then so you ask certain questions around that part, and ultimately when it comes to operating from an internal family system perspective is gaining some awareness about your parts and knowing when they're showing up. So it doesn't mean that you have to get rid of them, but instead of your parts dictating and controlling I can now be a lot more selective, and I have some sense of agency over those parts. So one analogy that I use when I'm explaining it to my clients is like, think about if you're in a car, right? And you in the car and all your parts in the car. When you don't have any awareness of your parts, they are each hopping into the driver's seat, just hopping in the driver's seat, and you in the trunk, like, I don't know what's going on. Like things are out of control, right? Because it's all these things are happening. You're making all these decisions. You are having all these responses, and it's just like I don't even understand what is going on with my life or with my world, right? When you start to understand your parts, like I said, you have some awareness, you can identify them, when they come out, the conditions. And so now the goal is, all your parts are still in the car, but they're in their seatbelts, and you're driving the car. And you can say, "Hey, such and such, which way we going? Hey, such and such, should I make a right here?" You can. It's a little more sense of agency, and you have the autonomy. So I hope that made sense. And like I said, it's not so much family systems theory. Whereas though when it comes to family systems theory, it's talking about how the family operates as a system. The actual, the nuclear family, the people within the household, the people with whom you are doing life with, right? It operates as a system where everybody has a role, everyone has a part. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about. I didn't get my master's in marriage and family therapy, so I'm not going to speak to that as much. I'm familiar with it, but I don't feel because I'm not classically trained in it, I wouldn't feel comfortable with like speaking to that in like a full way. But it is a system, and one of the things a lot of my experience has been in drug and alcohol therapy. So that's when I would talk about that, so there is the person in the middle who is the addict, and then there are all the people around them who either, can help contribute to that cycle or are enabling that cycle or have removed themselves from that system. So that's been the majority of my experience with understanding family systems therapy, and just really understanding how it all operates. But that's as much as I'll share on that, just because like I wouldn't want anybody thinking that I'm an expert in that area, and I'm not.
No, and that's what I'm learning about too. I'm taking co-occurring disorders right now, and then like rehabilitation when it comes to like being in jail and having that. And so they were talking about family systems and the way that you was just explaining it too,
Sure.
and how they just function and play a part, like you said, one being removed or you're not having it, or how they contribute or whatever the case may be. So it was just interesting me to learn that, and how it, like, when you start to take a step back and study it, you're like, oh, it makes sense, and how it serves it. So no, I appreciate that. And that was a little bit for myself and a little bit of homework that I might use for tonight. But please talk about why my piece is most important and why
Oh.
you decided to put it in a book.
Oh my gosh. All right. So this really started as, like I think I said to you earlier, like I journal a lot. Like journaling has been maybe one of my biggest coping skills since I was like a teenager. So this really started as me just like journaling and just kind of like reflecting on my life. Different challenges, circumstances, things that I was going through. And one day I was like, oh, shoot, this could be a book, just kind of like looking at a few different pieces. And then I just started typing it, and I would come back and forth to it and consider it. And then I think in 2019, I was like, all right, I really, let me just execute. Let me just go ahead and do it. And I think sometimes, I think and especially our society, like a lot of times we will tie significant things to like certain ages. So I was like, I'm turning 30, 30 and thriving, about to be out here. I'm gonna write me this book by the time I'm turning 30, so that's what it was. And like in hindsight, if I didn't do it at 30, it would have still been okay, right? Like it's all good. So hopefully you, whoever is listening, you hear that. Like your accomplishments and achievements don't have to be tied to a specific age. And sometimes society will try to influence us and tell us, oh, you need to have this by 22 and this by 35 and this, and that's not a reality. You do things at your own pace. So I can acknowledge that I was influenced by that and like, oh, I really want to do that. So it was partially that influence, and then partially just like me being disciplined and seeing something through, right? So it was more internal motivation than what it was external motivation. So I'll say that. But yeah, so just rereading the different aspects and different pieces and understanding like how helpful it was for me to go through those different things. And again, just like a guide moment, like this can be a guide for somebody, this can be a help, this can be a support for somebody. And I have just been astounded by the feedback that I get. And like it was such a it was such a act of love for me when with writing it and putting it out, that I sometimes forget that I wrote a book and people are like, oh my gosh, did it? I'm like, oh shoot, for real, so it's crazy to me when people are saying those different things. Oh my gosh, I didn't see, that's crazy. I
I
didn't even know.
forget that I write a book sometimes because it
I
really
didn't
was like getting it out of you. And
Just
like you
getting it
said,
out, putting it out into the world. So that's really what it was. I would probably say, so it's a 31 day read, 31 day devotional, however, whatever synonym you want to use of it. But each day each day is a topic. You read about it. It's a lot of it is, my experience. Some of it is, my knowledge, some of it is wisdom, whatever it is, but it's a bunch of different topics, from faith to family to spirituality to navigating relationships to coming of age. So any number of areas, but really just how I learned to maintain a sense of internal peace despite what might be going on in my life, right? Like understanding that I can't control what's going on outside of me all the time, and understanding that control is a myth, right? So I can say I'm trying to do all this stuff, but what am I really doing? But giving myself an anxiety attack, So understanding that like my peace is most important. So if when it comes to certain habits, when it comes to certain behaviors, when it comes to certain relationships, and I start with habits and behaviors because those are within me first, those are my decisions, right? So a lot of times I think one of the things going on right now is just like, oh well, if it don't bring you no peace, get rid of it. That's not always a reality, right? If I have to contend or endure or suffer this thing, I'm gonna suffer it and I'm gonna still have peace within me, right? Because this is the only thing that I can control. And sometimes I was the one with the chaos, sometimes I was the one with the drama, sometimes I was the one being cantankerous and confrontation, like, and it's just like, no, I'm choosing peace. So that means looking at myself, that means trying my best to practice healthy choices, that means trying my best to shift my thoughts and to look at things differently, so when I talk about my peace is most important, it's that first. And then, as a result of the choices that I'm making and who I am, my surroundings are going to, they're going to shift because I might not be in that space anymore. I might not be around those people anymore. So that's really what my peace is most important is about. 31 days. So it's perfect if you want to read something every day for a month. It's perfect if even if you can't read it daily, even if something that you read weekly, and it also has like journal prompts at the end of each reading day. So the topic, it'll share a blurb, and then it gives you an opportunity to reflect on it a little deeper. So my hope is that the people, as you are reading, as you're using these journaling prompts, you are understanding more about yourself, you're understanding more about your patterns and habits, and understanding more about what it means and what it looks like for you to really practice peace in your life.
no, I appreciate that, and what you said too is so true in everything that you do. As I've been connected and being able to see you in different aspects of what you put out to the world. She prioritized peace, and even to the point where she said that, and you had to remind me and Taz, and I'm about to get into that now, where it was like, we don't wait on people, right? Like we create the magic. We don't gotta wait for this to work. We don't gotta wait for this. We gotta go do what we gotta do to make it happen. And going right into that, I'll speak about what we are in partnership. I told you I keep Black Hill the last part of it because I want to know the individual. And something recently that I spoke of on the earlier episode about how we are doing something within the community around gun violence in Philadelphia. But to me, this is your baby. I had to be the opportunity to be a part of it. But this is actually something that you came up with the name Gun Violence Group Therapy. Just talk about the back experience and your thought process around it.
Sure. So gun violence group therapy for me was born in 2019, early 2020. So in 2019, a loved one of mine, he was killed, in gun violence, right? And he was a young man we lived on the same block for a really long time. And we know how Black folks is. If you live on a block long enough, that's your cousin. So my little
Mm-hmm.
cousin was killed in 2019. And he was probably about 8 or 9 years younger than me, maybe 7 to 9 years younger than me. But watching him grow up, and he was older than my younger siblings. So my younger siblings and my nephews, they looked up to him. So when I found out that he had passed, I was heartbroken. Like, of course, I've known people who've gotten killed, and but it hitting that close to home, I was very heartbroken. His mom, his aunt, who are like I call them my aunts. I'm just like, damn, like, and to see how bad my younger siblings were hurt and suffering, and I'm just like, yo, God, I have to do something. Like, what can I do to help my family heal, like help my neighborhood, help my community heal? Like, we need to do something. And that was when it came to me. Like, God gave me this idea, and I'm like, well, I do group therapy regularly. Like, at the time I was working in an agency doing drug and alcohol counseling. So like, I can run a group standing on my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, all right, I've done grief counseling before. I'm gonna do something, bring everybody together so we can process our feelings. And gun violence group therapy came to me. So in February of 2020, I hosted just one event, right? And it was his family, my family, people from the neighborhood, my one girlfriend. She let us do it in her hair salon. So I did psychoeducation, and did journaling exercises and self-reflection. And it was an opportunity for everybody to share where they were, share how they were feeling, and just hopefully it gave them tools to be able to manage that grief a little bit better. So that was where that concept was originally birthed. And then we all know what happened in March of 2020. The
Mm-hmm.
world shut down. So any idea that I had about continuing gun violence group therapy, the pandemic kind of threw that away, because I'm like, all right, it is what it is. I did it once, that was great. And then fast forward to 2021, when Taz, which is the founder of Black Men Hill, she reached out to me and was like, hey, Edie, didn't you do something for gun violence before? Like, we got offered a grant for the city to like possibly do something to combat gun violence. And I'm like, oh yeah, I have this concept, this framework already. So that's where it was kind of born. And now what it's maturing into, instead of it just being like a one-off type of event, gun violence group therapy is now going to be an 8-week program, right? And the initially the target audience was just whoever, and it was mostly people who had lost a loved one. But now what we're focusing on is individuals who have just been impacted by gun violence, in your neighborhood, in your family, in your home, all those different aspects of gun violence, even if you didn't lose a loved one. And as you already know, but just for the audience listening, it's broken into cohorts. So this first cohort that we're going to be focusing on is the youth. So it's going to be young men around the ages of 12 to 17. And then we'll have a group for young adults, and then we'll have a group for families. But it really just blossomed into this labor of love, really just blossomed into what I hope is this project that can expand to different cities. And people can adapt this model and really just like help people to grow and understand how gun violence, specifically the trauma of gun violence, impacts your mental health, and increase and understand ways to be able to better navigate that system, and also increase alternatives to coping. So that's where GVGT came from. And like, I'm excited about it. It feels surreal that it's taken off in this way. And like I said, the thing that was literally just like a labor of love, like, I got to do something. And honestly, that's how the majority of my
Of
things
life.
start. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't do anything unless my heart is in it. And that sounds like super hopeless romantic, but like, it needs to serve a purpose. Like, I'm not obviously I need to make money and I have to earn an income, but like, people who are like, oh yeah, it's gonna get you, and it's like, what is it serving, like, and help heal serve, right? Like, who is it helping, who is it serving, how do I can I do I really feel, do I really care about this issue and this topic? Like, I can make money all day long, but what matters most, it's like, what is it, what's the purpose of it, and what's the mission of it, and like, does it what's the impact going to be? So this is something that is important to me. Like, I may have moved out of the city where there is a lot of gun violence and all that stuff, but my family still live there. I
Mm-mm.
have loved ones still there, and this is something that's still important. And if my knowledge, insight, help, support, therapy services, if it can help somebody just a little bit of an information in where they are, then amen. Like, then we gonna do it. So that's GVGT, man.
Nah, and man, when you came up with the name and just the program and everything like that, because I was a part of the process of building the opposite side through Black Man Hill, where we wanted to provide a program, but when Taz says, nope, I have something that Edie has brought together, and mind you, I'm seeing all of this stuff from email. I'm like, well, Edie, who is Edie? Like, doing all of this, and where all this come from? And by the
Right,
time of
right.
this recording, I'm sure we'll be still accepting applicants and within the city of Philadelphia. And just like Edie said, we will be springboarding it, hopefully, if it's successful, to the community, and we're gonna put it into the air and say it is. We will be able to do it in all the states that we service as far as Black Men as an organization, and doing of that nature. Um, my last thoughts, that I think that is a pretty much ended the conversation. That wasn't all that I had on the paper. I told you it went off the script, but
It's all good.
I'm happy that it went to where, or I'm happy that it went where it went.
Yeah.
I want any lasting remarks, because I want to make sure people stay tapped in. I'm sure you gave them enough gems or whatever to like satisfy them, but I also want them to stay tapped in with everything that you're doing as well, because even online, doing the social media, I see you get more into that. And then I know you said you was going to do podcasts and getting into that.
Yeah,
Like, what can
yeah.
they expect? What do you want people to take away from this conversation?
What I really just want people to take away from this conversation, is I think that that the conversation of mental health, especially mental health in the Black community, it's becoming it's happening a lot more often, and I love that, and I appreciate that. I love that for us, right? Um, and I want people to know from a therapist is that we are human too, right? So, like, yes, I'm doing stuff on social media, but I'm not as active on my social media as I would like to be, or as I sometimes think I should be. So being when you see if you see a therapist, or if you're engaging with a therapist, understanding that that is just a human who has a heart, who wants to serve, understanding that they are no different than you. They just might have a different set of knowledge, a different set of insight, a different set of intellect that can be a resource or a help to you. So really just understanding that, like, this, I can use this as a resource, but also I have things within me that can help me to overcome and grow as well. Managing your expectations, even when it comes to utilizing and seeking services. I am going to be starting my podcast, so hopefully by the time you guys hear this my podcast will be launched. It's going to be based off of the concept of my book. It's going to be called It's the Peace for Me. And now that I put it out there, I have to do it, right? So there that is. And then by the time that you all hear this, this may have already happened, but I plan to have rolling admissions for it. So I'm starting a breakup recovery group. So if you are navigating a challenging relationship, or considering or contemplating breaking up, or if you've recently ended a romantic relationship, you might be interested in this. So the group is going to be called Concrete Rose. You can learn a lot more about the group by going to my website, www.edierking.com, and it'll probably be in Reggie's show notes. So you can find out more about the group on my website. It is going to be $100 for a 6-week group that covers all 6 of the weeks, the therapy, the content, all those things that come along with that. And really, the goal is to help you to navigate the breakup of the relationship and also build a healthier relationship with yourself. So if that's something that you're interested in, and of course, buy my book. You can go to my website for that as well. You can also find it on Amazon. My Peace is Most Important. I appreciate all the support and the love and the likes and the comment and all those different things. And sometimes it's overwhelming, so sometimes I will take social media breaks because I'm human and my peace is most important, right? So like I engage when I need to. I engage when I can, right? So like I engage to the point of my capacity. I have a lot of feelings about social media and opinions about it, and my relationship with social media has been complicated because of how all consuming it can be and how all consuming it's become for our society. So I have to take it in doses. So if you can manage that or tolerate that, I definitely welcome you to follow me on my therapy page. It's a therapy with Edie, which might be in the show notes as well. But I definitely enjoy I've definitely enjoyed having this conversation with you, Reg. I value you. I appreciate you so much. I love all the work that you're doing, like from the time that I joined Black Men Hill, and like when I think when I started to notice you and just like how live and lovely your personality is and how committed you are to helping people to overcome and how committed you are to being the most authentic version of yourself. Like every time I engage with you, you are always the same, excited, loving, kind, motivated person, and I think I said to you the other day in text, I said, yo, Doug, you always putting everybody, you are always plugging everyone. And that's sometimes it's a second thought for me, but for you, you are always considering and thinking about everyone else. And you can tell it's just really your desires to help to see people overcome and to see people be better and heal. And, just like just come into a space of a greater sense of understanding about self. And I appreciate you. So thank you so much for having me on, man.
No, I appreciate that and I receive that. I would usually like not take it, but I appreciate. I'm learning the concept that and I'll say it really quickly that someone told me that it made it stick out for me. If someone goes to hand you flowers and you smack them down, that's
Right.
disrespectful. And so
Mhm.
now I've learned to just receive the flowers and say
Yeah.
thank you as opposed to smacking them down like, oh, I don't deserve these flowers or do anything like that. And I received that. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Please share this episode with someone. Please share a comment that Edie made. She made a lot. Again, I can't. I'm putting it on camera. I'm putting on record that this is one of my favorite episodes for at least this year. I know alone, but it may be top 5, top 10 of all because again, I learned something. I've it expanded my mind with certain things. So I appreciate that. Share, leave a review, leave a comment on Apple Podcasts. That helps out a lot with like promoting these conversations and letting Edie know she just said something well. Like share a comment on there and let her know. And last but not least, always remember that this platform has never been about being a replacement to therapy. It's an alternative place where people share therapeutic stories. Thank you for listening.